Well, here we are, folks, back for another one of my product reviews. This one, we're going to be looking at the Eduard 1/48 scale Fokker Dr.1. Now, this is the weekend edition, so it is slightly simpler. It really only has one decal option, and it was a lot cheaper to buy. I think I paid like $5 or $6 Canadian for this when I was on vacation in Poland. So it's relatively inexpensive compared to the other kits because it's relatively simple. Instructions are kind of just photocopied. They're not color or anything. One decal option, but the plastic you get inside is the standard Fokker Dr.1 plastic. So you can get this in some of the more elaborate boxings, which would have, photo etch and seat belts and all that other fun stuff, and loads and loads and loads of decal options. So it just depends on which version you want to go with. So as usual with these kits, we'll start with the plastic. We'll work our way through the sprues. I will zoom you in a little bit here just because this is such a small little tiny kit. I mean, you just put that in perspective. The fuselage itself is a little less than 4 inches long, 3 3/4 inches, and that's what, about 10 and a half centimeters. So it's not very long at all, maybe 105 millimeters or something. So relatively small. So you start off here with Sprue A, and you get the right half fuselage, the top and middle wing. The wings are molded as one piece. So there's no halves to put together. You get top and bottom molded as one piece, which also means you get a perfect scaled trailing edge, and the leading edge won't have any seams. So all of these like rib details that wrap around the leading edge will actually wrap around, other than cleaning up the sprue gates. There's no, and the sprue gates are smartly mounted in between those rib details. So you can get in there and clean up those sprue gate locations and not damage any of that leading edge detail, which is a nice touch. So right half fuselage, top wing and mid wing, the tail planes, and you do get 2 different options for tails. I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between them. It's hard to say. One might be slightly longer just looking at them, but I can't really tell if there's a difference between them. You also get your fourth wing, as they call it, which is the wing that belongs in between the landing gear. And this is a section of the upper fuselage that covers this mid wing. So you get that all on Sprue A. Now for the ailerons, there are actually 2 sets of ailerons. You see this one here kind of comes straight across and then has 2 scallops that angle up, whereas this one comes straight across and only has 1 scallop that angles up. So this aileron has slightly more surface area than this aileron. I don't know which one was first, which one was second. I'm assuming this one came first and they added these as a retrofit later on to increase roll rate, if I had to take a guess. But interior fuselage detail is not, there's really nothing there. There's just a couple of hints of some interior structure, but it's so small. Once you get it painted up, you're not going to see much in there anyways. So it's not too bad. Wing detail, as I mentioned, is nice. You've got all the rib molding detailed on. You do have, especially on this upper wing, you do have some little kind of like inspection panels molded directly into it. And there is the hint of where, I think those are the struts, the little locking points for the struts to go into. So not horrible. It's a nice little kit, but it's little. Moving on to Sprue B, you get the left half of the fuselage, as well as the axle portion of that fourth wing where the wheels go on. You get the lower wing, which goes into the fuselage, and again, molded as one piece. Nice crisp trailing edge detail. Cockpit floor, there's some other bits and pieces here. The horizontal stab, the vertical stab, the cowling, which is nicely molded as well. Some little rivet detail and stuff in there. So, it'll look really nice when it's all painted up. I believe this is the piece that goes here on the lower wing, fills the fuselage. Wheels, 2 horizontal stabs, and it looks like this one is just a little fatter than this one. So again, must be a later version that gave it more control authority. And then again, your 2 ailerons, the different versions depending on what you build. Finally, Sprue C is the larger sprue. It has all of your detail parts on it. So things like your engine, your rotary engine, as well as your intake manifold. You've got machine guns, and you have 4 machine guns. So there's 2 different options, one with the shroud, one without the shroud. Tail skids, the wingtip skids, bits and pieces in here for the cockpit detail, lots of little bits and bobs over here. I think that is the pilot seat. This is a strip that goes on the belly of the fuselage. You've got the interior cockpit sides, the wooden structure inside the cockpit, wing struts, outer wing struts, propellers, 2 different propellers, one with like a curved leading edge and with a straight leading edge, and then again a bunch more bits and bobs here. Looks like a pilot seat cushion. I don't know what that is. Something to do probably with a firewall or something. So yeah, there's quite a bit going on. Lots of little pieces, but it's a small airplane. Again, detail is really nice. The seat cushion looks like fabric. It's got the little buttons on it. It looks like it's been pulled down, and like I said, a bit of weathering and dry brushing that'll pop. The engine is beautiful. The fins on the cylinders are nicely done. Details on the crankcase are there. Installing all of these intake pieces will be fun. A lot of little tiny plastic pieces that look like they want to break easily. But yeah, you get that painted up like a nice steel color, and you paint this color up in an alclad color or something. That engine would look really, really nice. You're not going to see much of it under the cowling, but it would still, for what you do see, it's going to be a nice kit. Looking forward to it. I am going to start practicing wood grain. It's one of the reasons why I'm building this kit now. There is a bit of, like, for example, propeller, and then there's a section in here in the fuselage that's a piece of wood. And then obviously the fuselage frames that go inside, it's all wood. So I'm going to start practicing and playing around with doing wood grain. This is a perfect kit to do it, because if I screw it up, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to see it. It's not going to be horrible, but I'd like to try to get that figured out. It's a good skill to have, and I've never done it before, so that's where I'm going to use this kit and the other one that you'll see here in a week or two. But I'll also be following on my monthly what's on my month update, and depending on when you've seen this, sorry, the monthly what's on my desk update, and depending on when you see this this review, I might have this kit started already. So take a look in my time-lapse playlist. This is kind of August of 2025 that I'm filming this, so if you're seeing this kind of months away from that, take a look at my time-lapse. I should have the time-lapse for this out by then, as I do plan on starting this relatively quickly. So moving on to the instructions, as I commented, the instructions in this weekend edition are just photocopies. They're not the nice full color booklets that most people are used to with Eduard. On the front here, it gives you the sprue layout. It also shows you the parts that aren't being used. The ailerons, so it's the early style ailerons. So one set of horizontal stabs and one set of ailerons don't get used, as well as the one set of machine guns. As I said, the plastic is the same plastic that would have been used across multiple kits, and they just kind of pick and choose what parts they use for what version. You also get the usual warnings from the manufacturer about being careful and what to do, and you get callouts, which are Mr. Color callouts, but using an internet converter, you can easily convert these to whatever brand you use. I tend to use Vallejo Model Air these days, with a smattering of the old Model Master oil paints still kicking around. So you can do all your conversions and figure out what you need to make this work. The steps aren't numbered on these, but the pictures are, the pages I should say are, so you can figure out what order to do things, but the individual steps aren't numbered. You just kind of have to use a little bit of common sense. For example, you can't install the cockpit until you build it first. So you have to, use common sense when you're going through the instructions. But you can see it starts with the build-up of the fuselage for obvious reasons. As I commented, the inside of the fuselage is supposed to be an olive drab color. And then, well, what is it again? CO12 is, olive drab. So the inside of the fabric is like an olive drab color, but there is this one little section that's supposed to be painted up in wood grain. So, either just paint it a tanny brown color or do a wood grain if you have those skills. And then you also build everything else up. So you see how the seat gets put together, built up from multiple parts, and then it gets glued in. And then the cockpit floor, as well as things like a compass and the rudder pedals and the control yoke, all of those all get assembled together, and it gets slid in. And you can see over here where the ammo trays for the machine guns also get slid in. So this is where you want to take your time, paint things up in the proper order. If you have to paint some things before others, make sure you're doing all that right so you don't end up kind of struggling at the end to make it all work. And use references. Now, unfortunately for the DR1, there are no original DR1s left in the world. Everything that we see today are reproductions. I believe the last original DR1 was destroyed in World War II. So it's just, there's none left. So it's very limited color, if any. I don't believe there's any color photos of the interior of a DR1. So a lot of it's just guessing and supposition based off of plans and other airframes, other types of airplanes that still exist today. So, you know, use some online references, but just don't take it as the gospel simply because there's no original pictures of the cockpit colors left. So moving on to this side, there's some more stuff that goes in. This might be the fuel tank that goes in here. I'm not too sure. But it also tells you, you know, it's nice here where it shows where all of these parts should all be stacked in the fuselage, so you can get your alignments correct. And then you can see here you glue the left hand side on, and then everything gets sandwiched together. And that's where, as I said, this C60, they're calling for that to be painted weird. On this side they're asking you to paint that frame olive drab, but on this side they're asking you to paint it gray. So again, it should be wood grain in my opinion, as the interior structure of this would have been made out of wood. So that's my plan. I'm going to wood grain these internal frames as well as that panel, and probably some more of this over here. C44 tan. So I'll probably wood grain that back panel, piece of plywood, wood grain. I'll do as much wood graining as I can. Same as like the floor here. I'll wood grain the floor. Try to do as much as I can to make that cockpit look original World War I. So then here at the bottom of page 3, you're assembling the fuselage, and there's this bulkhead that goes in. Again, probably a piece of plywood. So I'm going to try to probably wood grain that. You're not going to see much. You'd have to look up inside the tail. But the whole point that I want to do this is to practice wood graining. So I might as well just go ahead and do it. The more practice I get, the better. Turn the page, we start work on wings. You'll see the mid-wing gets assembled. These struts get slid through holes in the wing. And then the that center fuselage piece gets glued on, and that all comes down. Those struts, it's up to you whether you want to install them now or later. It just depends on how much masking you want to do when it comes to painting stages. But other than that, the top and bottom wing, I would probably not assemble until after it's painted, just so that you can get the paint on properly. I would almost say put the mid-wing in, leave the struts out, paint the upper, lower wing, and the fuselage and mid-wing as one unit, and then go through and add these after the fact. Completely up to you though. Over here we glue the lower wing in, and that's that piece that fills the hole in the lower fuselage. So again, depending on how much seams you want to clean up, you might want to do that sooner versus later. But I have a feeling that's probably an actual seam on the real airframe, because that lower wing would probably be a single wing with a single straight spar through both wings, and it would literally slot in with like a fabric covering exactly the way this is being assembled. So I would think leaving that seam is probably more accurate than not. And then here you'll see where that strip goes down the middle to act as like a seam between the two halves of fabric. My guess is the fabric is draped over the fuselage and the seam lines up at the bottom, so there's a strip that's glued across that seam to hold everything together and stitched, and that's what that's replicating. You've also got a step, as well as all your skids, the tail skids and then the little wingtip skids to stop the wings from impacting the ground if you tilt one way or the other on landing. Moving on, tail gets put together, horizontal stab, elevators, the rudder. It doesn't really have a vertical stab. The entire vertical stabilizer is the rudder. You also get control horns that go on for control lines. Then we work on engine, cowling, guns. Again, I wouldn't be gluing the guns on until after everything gets painted. Some more little bits over here, the upper wing, the aileron, some more control horns and little things. It looks like shell chutes for the machine guns. Not sure what that is. I'll have to do some research to see what that's supposed to be. But yeah, all your struts go into place. You'll also see it shows you to do some minimal rigging in here. So just be aware of that. And then over here, you've got your control lines, your struts and stuff for the tails. You'll also see this again, shows it here. The rigging that needs to be put in place for the control surfaces on the tail, as well here when you glue the the wheels together, you'll see there is a little bit of rigging that goes between the landing gear. So just be aware of that if you do plan to do the rigging. And again, it gives you the choice of the two propellers, so you can kind of pick and choose which one you want. So that's the main instructions. Again, not very complicated. A lot of little bits, but overall it seems to be a pretty simple construction if you take your time. And then, as I mentioned, it only has one color scheme included in this weekend kit, and it's this one here, which is aircraft 545/17, and is flown by Lieutenant Hans Weiss. Yeah, so it's a pretty, it doesn't look like a complicated scheme, but it would be, especially for an aircraft this small, a relatively complicated scheme to paint. All the struts are red, which is why I said I would leave that strut out until after the wing is painted, because you got to paint it red, paint the wing, and then slip the red strut down into the wing after the fact. All the other struts you can paint before assembly. The wheels are red, the cowling's red. That's all easy. The airframe itself is a bit complicated. You can also see why I say it makes sense to paint the wings separate, because first thing, and this is how I would do it. Obviously, you can do it differently depending on how you choose, but the way I would come across this or attack this plan, first and foremost, I would paint all of the parts, well, some parts. I would paint all of the fuselage white. I would paint the upper wing white, and I would paint the entirety of the lower wing bottom white. Then I would mask everything off. Anything that has to stay white would get masked off. The fuselage would be masked off. The upper wing, probably wouldn't have to mask the upper wing, but it wouldn't hurt to lay a bit of masking tape across it so you don't have any bleed over. And then I'd mask off these squares on the lower wings. Then I would paint everything the light blue color, including the fuselage. So the mid wing would be completely painted blue top and bottom. All the forward fuselage, top, bottom, would be painted blue. The lower wing, again, painted blue completely top and bottom minus the masking. Then that upper wing, I'd paint the bottom of it blue. Now, luckily, that upper wing is done. It's white on top, blue on the bottom. It's finished. Now, the rest of everything after I painted the blue is when I would go through, I'd probably put a layer of future on it first to seal the blue. And then I would go ahead and start streaking with this green. And I'd probably use two different color greens that I have, and just paint it on and then start streaking it off, wiping it off, leaving streaks, multiple layers, and build up this look. A bit of probably like an olive green and a dark green. There's a bit of yellow in there as well, but I don't think, it could be a bit of a brown. But yeah, that's what I would do. I would do like an olive brown, like a light olive with like a forest green, and just blend it all and streak it. And the wings, you can see, get streaked on an angle. So that's all I would do. And at the end of it all, you should end up with a decent looking, weathered kit. So we'll see how that goes. Again, it's going to be a bit of practice for me, because I don't know how it's going to look at the end. But that's how I would attack everything. Then you can pull all the masking off, gloss coat the whole thing, and apply your decals. When it comes to decals, there are not a lot. This is legitimately all you get, but also it's because it's only for one scheme, so you're not doing multiple schemes. So you can see decal 2 are for the fuselage sides and the rudder sides. Decal 3 is the lower wing, and then the upper wing, and you do get the extra piece for around the aileron. Sorry, I'm just looking. It's interesting. They say to paint everything white, but then it looks like there's a different color. Yeah, I might even, I don't know how I would do that. I'd probably paint everything like a different color white. I don't know. It's hard to say. I'll probably just do it all white. The instructions make it look like the white around the roundel is a slightly different shade than the rest of the white. Like the rest of the white has a bit more of a yellowy tone to it, or greenish tone, like a linen color. but I just paint the whole thing white probably. But anyway, see, all your markings cover those, and then you've got the fuselage side. There's some instruments that go in place. All of these little stencils, 4 and 5, all along the tail. 7 goes on the side of the cowling. This is probably the first time I'm looking at this even, so I'm learning. There we go. There's a line that goes down the side of the fuselage on this side. 4 up here. 8, yeah, goes on the side. So it's 1, 2. Oh yeah, there we go on the elevators. So yeah, it would not very difficult to put together. The decals would take like a day to do. Painting probably going to take the longest out of all of this because of the complicated nature of this, the constant masking and the streaking and all that. But anyways, that is that. That's the Eduard 1/48 scale DR1 weekend edition. As I said, if you want to see the process of me building this, keep an eye on the monthly What's on My Desk updates as well, depending on how long you are. As I mentioned, take a look in the time-lapse section. I might already have this finished and started, so take a look at that. So on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you for watching. We'll see you all next time.